Today, as I'm recording this, I'm commemorating the first year of my father's passing. Like many of us in the EDC world, our fathers would most likely been our first influencer, and that was my papa for me. Now, I have a couple of things from him which were absolutely his everyday carry or part of his everyday carry system. Aside from the car keys, the wallet, he always had this particular Parker pen with his name engraved on it and this utility knife that he passed down to me. And this particular utility knife is about more than 30 years old. And these two items were practically all of what he carried back in the day. So, how does this affect my own everyday carry system? Now, I try to copy the same template when it comes to my everyday carry system. The thing about having just one item the whole time is that you get to appreciate the quality and the utility of whatever items you choose to have as your EDC. And this particular cutter was carried by my dad constantly for years before he passed it down to me, and I myself carried this for more than a decade before getting my first folding knife. So for me, as an everyday carry practitioner, as a readiness practitioner, that's what I strive to achieve every single day in terms of my everyday carry system. Now, I'd like to have something on me that I will have constantly, because when you say, if you follow the term strictly, the term EDC strictly, it would mean that it would be something, a tool that you will have on you every single day, which is why I would prefer to call my tools urban carry tools or my urban carry system, because nowadays I get to rotate stuff that I have. So one day I'll carry a Spyderco, one day I'll carry a Cold Steel. That's how it's been over the last few years, at the very least for the last 2 decades. So when I first got the chance to upgrade my everyday carry system, I found this particular knife, and this is the Buck Flick It. And at the time, it was one of the few knives, one of the few pocket knives that actually had a pocket clip on it. As everyone knows, the Spydercos were the first company to incorporate a pocket clip into their knives. And as far as I know, as far as I can tell, the Buck and the Gerber also followed suit with their own versions of the pocket clip. So this is my first pocket clip knife, and this particular blade costs about 3 times less than the Spyderco, which is why I was able to get it. And even back in the day, Spydercos were rather overpriced or way beyond my income capacity. So I never really got the Spyderco until quite recently. So this was a blade that I carried since maybe the end of 2000 until 2012, I guess, when I got another clip-on pocket knife. It wasn't a Spyderco, but I remember it was something that I can clip onto my pocket. And so this got sort of retired from service, but every so often I would still carry this because it served me well in the past, and it's been a good long run for the both of us. So I keep this more for sentimental value than anything else. Another one of my really old EDC items is this Zeno E03 flashlight, which I talked about in the last video. And I've carried this thing since 2011, and as I demonstrated, it still works really well. And somehow, with the universality of the power source of this particular flashlight, by all means, it should be the only thing I would carry. But since I have other flashlights and other stuff, other EDC items or other urban carry items, I still keep this thing on the rotation, so to speak. Now, the point that I was getting into, the point that I was making anyways, is that we now live in a world where knife companies or tool makers, toy makers have been constantly churning out products and paying off influencers to have us get the latest and greatest, coolest stuff. And at one point in my EDC journey, I was that kind of a guy. I was the gullible type of guy who bought into all the hype and somehow bought whatever I could based on the influencers, based on the influence, or I should say, based on the brainwashing that influencers did on me. And that's all my fault. I bought into the hype, I bought into the lifestyle, or I needed the social approval. It would be a boost to my own ego whenever I'd go to events and there'd be a pocket dump or a show and tell where I would brandish my new acquisitions and stuff like that. And the weird thing about it is I always carried a knife ever since my teens, ever since I was 13 or 14 years old. I've always carried a knife to be that guy who was able to solve stuff, solve problems. I wanted to be the guy who knew what to do whenever something happened. And most of all, I wanted to be the guy who looked cool, pulling out a blade and cutting that fruit, peeling that mango or something to that effect. But unfortunately, although I did that to impress girls, it wasn't the girls that were particularly impressed with my performance. So I find that totally weird, and for decades it's been like that. There's only been one or two ladies who actually complimented my blades or the fact that I was sort of a MacGyver back in the day. From all the decades that I've been an EDC practitioner, two or three ladies, and every other person who complimented my everyday carry system was a guy, was a dude. And I find that so weird. So, whenever influences work their magic on you, think about this. You're only trying to be cool with the cool guys because girls don't particularly care, or girls don't care at all about whether you have a cool knife or a sexified pistol on your hip. Girls don't care. But the influencers will make it appear like, yeah, you need to get this to be cool, to be in with the in crowd. And that's the problem that we're facing every day, to the point where I believe that the prepping community, those who practice the EDC lifestyle, are the perfect market for anything. Just like a few years ago, they were the perfect market for garbage being sold by the mainstream media, or everybody knows what happened 4 years ago or 5 years ago when this particular news flash came out. All the preppers did was don their gas mask, and it was a perfect example of a product being marketed to the right crowd. And unfortunately, those who are in the EDC lifestyle will be the perfect customers for anything, whether it's a new knife, a new flashlight, a new multi-tool, a new holster, a new pistol, whatever. They will be the perfect customer, and this particular customer attitude becomes part of their personality, that anything related to survival, preparedness, everyday carry can be sold to them with very little coercion. So it will take minimal effort for something to be sold to them, and they will completely buy into it, hook, line, and sinker. They will take the bait and they'll just buy anything. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to buy stuff, but the point is, what I've discovered over the last few years is that when I opened my hard case where I keep this particular flashlight and I keep this particular knife, I began to realize that, hey, these two items have had a good role. We've had a wild ride together. We've been to places together. We've done stuff. And the battle scars on these things make them quite lovely and endear them to me all the more. They're no longer shiny new toys to have, but rather they become companions which have helped me solve a lot of problems in the past. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're getting into the EDC lifestyle, consider getting a knife and carrying it for the longest time. We're all being sold products that are supposed to be indestructible, but almost every day somebody sells you a new thing, somebody sells you a new item. And before you know it, you're carrying this on a Monday, you're carrying another knife on a Tuesday, you're carrying another knife on a Wednesday, and so on and so forth. It detracts from the actual principle of everyday carry, which is why I refuse to call it everyday carry, but rather I simply call it the urban carry system, because I mostly carry these things while I'm up and about in the city or something like that. So these things are constant companions in my everyday life. Over time, I've acquired other items which relegate these things into the rotation, or they're just kept in a box for memory's sake, for sentimental reasons. But I'd like to see myself carry a knife again, or a particular brand of knife, constantly for the next decade, or even longer than that. Just like I've carried this flashlight for the last 13 years, and it still works. It's a relatively cheap flashlight, but it takes any kind of AA battery and it still works to this day. No problems. It's even better than other overrated flashlight brands. So that's just my rant. I've been percolating these thoughts for a while, and you know, it's just that I've been thinking about my papa and having his stuff with me, and him being my main influence in the everyday carry system, the everyday carry lifestyle. I can't help but go back to the old days when you just had one simple cutting tool and you were all set. You could solve any problem, and this thing has solved a lot of problems, cutting tasks. And for a time, I considered using this thing for other stuff. So, anyway, that's about it for my rant. And before I go, I'd like to thank those of you who are new to the channel, who are just subscribed. We're now up to 777 subscriptions as of last count. Good job, guys. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for the likes, and thank you for the future subscriptions. I'm especially grateful for all those who love to comment on the videos. It gives me a chance to interact with you guys. That's been the long and the short of it. This has been Sabando for Manila Sentinel Raw. EDC is every day.
5.100, maintain runway heading, climb 3,000 feet, runway 13, clear for immediate